The first assassin smiled when the princess's door clicked shut. Captain Elias then heard the tiny magnetic seal engage beneath his palm, a clean mechanical click swallowed by the orchestra drifting through the reception hall. The door was black alloy, cold enough to sting through his glove. On the other side, Princess Celira stood beneath a spill of amber light, her silver-blue skin reflecting the crystal lamps like moonlight on water. Her ceremonial mantle whispered against the floor. "You lock me in," she said. Elias kept his eyes on the narrow seam around the door. "Yes, Your Highness. That is not how a bodyguard earns trust." A second click answered him from the corridor. Not a lock. A shoe clasp, carefully released. Then another. The palace air system breathed warm citrus through its vents, but Elias caught something underneath it. Hot polymer, weapon lubricant, the sharp metallic scent of power cells pushed too hard. He slid the security latch down. It was an old-fashioned piece of hardware, installed after the royal family had complained that smart locks could be hacked. A simple steel bar. No signal. No code. No negotiation. Celira watched him set it into place. Her long fingers tightened around the pale fabric at her throat. "How many?" she asked. Elias checked the reflection in the polished door panel. A waiter passed at the end of the corridor carrying a silver tray. His posture was too square. His left wrist was too still. "At least one," Elias said. The waiter stopped. The music from the ballroom rose into a bright, laughing crescendo. Then the man's tray tilted, and beneath the folded linen Elias saw the dull graphite mouth of a compact pulse pistol. Elias drew his own weapon, but did not fire. The attacker raised one gloved hand toward the door, fingers spreading around a signal puck. Elias stepped closer, blocking the seam between the door and the wall. "Princess," he said, low and steady, "move away from the entrance." Celira did not move. Instead, she crossed the room to the wall console, her mantle brushing the floor in a soft hiss. Her people built palaces that obeyed bloodlines. Elias had learned that during his first week on the job. She pressed her palm to the glass. Blue light climbed through the delicate markings on her wrist. "You are not the only one allowed to make decisions," she said. The room shuddered. Heavy shutters slammed across the tall windows, cutting off the glittering city beyond. The air changed at once, colder, stiller. A red security glyph burned above the ceiling. Elias looked at her. "What did you do?" "I sealed the royal wing." Her gaze did not leave the door. No one enters. No one leaves. Outside, the waiter's signal puck flashed once. The corridor lights went out. For a breath, there was only darkness and the faint blue glow of Celira's handprint fading from the console. Then something struck the outer door hard enough to make the steel bar groan. Elias raised his weapon. Celira stood beside him now, no longer behind him, her ceremonial calm gone quiet and sharp. Another impact came. Then another. Not one attacker testing the lock. Several. Elias listened to the rhythm of boots gathering in the dark corridor, the whispered scrape of weapons against armor, the soft electronic chirps of people coordinating a breach. 20 was too many for a ceremonial reception. Too many for a political warning. Celira's eyes narrowed at the trembling door. "Captain," she whispered, "they did not come to take me alive." The old steel bar shuddered in its brackets, dust whispering from the seam where it had been welded decades before. Somewhere beyond the door, a cutter began to whine, thin at first, then rising into a needle-bright scream that vibrated through the marble floor. Elias kept his weapon aimed at the center of the door. Princess Celira did not look at it. Her silver-blue fingers moved over the blackened biometric console beside the reception table. The palace had gone dark when she sealed the wing. Only emergency strips remained, casting a low blue sheen across the overturned glasses and the white petals crushed beneath someone's boot. "The seal was meant to protect the royal family," Elias said. "It won't stop 20 people with military tools." "No," Celira answered. Her voice was soft enough that the cutter nearly swallowed it. "But it gives me jurisdiction." She pressed her palm flat against the scanner. Pale lines climbed beneath her skin, matching the light in the panel. A warning appeared above her hand in imperial script, then translated itself in sharp, white letters. "Sovereign Emergency Authority. Irreversible activation." Elias glanced at her. "What does that do?" Celira's jaw tightened once. "It makes this wing mine alone." Another impact landed against the door. The bar bent inward by less than an inch. Elias measured it anyway. Metal remembered every blow. So did people. Princess, he said, if you trigger something you can't undo, they already made their choice. She touched the confirmation mark. The palace answered with a sound like a distant bell struck underwater. Blue light rushed through the ceiling seams. The corridor outside flashed bright enough to silhouette boots beneath the door. Then every hidden camera in the sealed wing turned toward the entrance. Every wall panel woke. Every reception room screen filled with the same image, the palace crest, silver crown over a field of stars. Celira stood straighter, not behind Elias, beside him. By sovereign authority, she said, and the emergency speakers carried her voice into every room trapped within the lock. This wing is now a royal court. The cutter stopped. Silence pressed against the door. Celira's hand remained on the console as a thin line of bloodless blue light traced around her wrist. The biometric system was reading more than identity now. It was taking her authority into itself, binding it to the seal. Any person crossing that threshold, she continued, will be recorded as committing attempted regicide before the assembled delegates of the Concord. Elias looked toward the dark screens. The delegates can see this? Not yet. Her eyes did not leave the door. But the record will survive me. That landed harder than the impacts. Elias lowered his weapon just enough to look at her fully. You just turned this into a public execution order. A public truth. Her fingers trembled once against the glass, then stilled. If I die here, every government in the system will know who sent them. The cutter began again, louder this time. Sparks hissed under the lower seam, bright orange against the blue emergency light. Elias stepped closer to the door, shoulders square, counting the seconds between the tool's pulses. Celira reached past him and opened a narrow communications channel built into the wall. Her voice crossed the corridor without raising. You have been identified. For 3 seconds, there was nothing but the cutter and the smell of hot metal. Then a man's voice came through the door. Calm. Filtered. No, princess. We have been witnessed. The cutter stopped. A heavy object scraped across the floor outside, followed by the mechanical click of something being assembled. Open the door, the voice said, or in 60 seconds, your court becomes your tomb. The countdown bled red across the communications panel, each second marked by a dry electronic click. Orange sparks crawled beneath the door's lower seam and died on the polished black floor, leaving the room smelling of scorched steel and hot insulation. Elias Vin did not touch the bar. He crossed to the wall beside the ceremonial projector, tore open its brass-edged service panel, and exposed a nest of fiber lines glowing pale green in the dark. What are you doing? Celira asked. Her silver-blue fingers rested against the emergency court console, still lit beneath the blue wash of the lockdown lamps, making sure they can't stay faceless. He pulled a thin audio lead free, stripped its outer sheath with the edge of his field knife, then fed it into an unused port beneath the court recorder. The projector hummed. Its glass lens brightened. Outside, something heavy clicked into place against the door. Elias heard the sound through the metal. Not one tool. Several. Your court records everything in this wing, he said. But the corridor channel is filtered. Their voice can be anyone's. Celira understood before he finished. Her eyes narrowed, reflecting the red countdown. You want their presence entered into the record. I want them to choose whether they exist. The modified channel opened with a burst of static. Cold corridor air whispered through the speaker grill. Elias pressed the transmit control. This is Captain Elias Vin, acting security officer to Princess Celira. By order of the Sovereign Court, every person present in this sealed wing will state their name and authority. Silence answered him. Then the filtered man laughed once. It was a small sound, almost polite. You have 43 seconds, Captain. Elias watched the waveform on the projector console. No names, he said. No authority. That goes in the record too. He switched the feed from the wall speaker to the court's environmental array. A holographic map unfolded above the reception table, thin as smoke. 20 amber points appeared beyond the door, scattered through the corridor, behind pillars, beside access junctions, crouched near the breach equipment. They were no longer a rumor behind steel. They were a number. 20 living heat signatures, each fixed in the sovereign record. Celira stepped closer to the projection. The light turned her skin the color of moonlit water. 20, she said softly. The man outside heard her. 20, he confirmed. You will not be remembered as a princess tonight. The words seemed to lower the temperature in the room. Elias kept one hand on the service panel and the other near his sidearm. Bad choice, he said. You just confirmed coordinated participation in a recorded attempt on a reigning sovereign. We did not come for a trial. No, Elias replied. You came because you thought there would be no one left to testify. A sharp metallic crack split the corridor. The breaching device had powered up. The old steel bar trembled inside its brackets, not from impact this time, but from a deep vibration traveling through the door itself. Celira looked at the 20 amber points. Her expression did not break, but she reached past Elias and placed her palm on the court console. Captain, she said, her voice low beneath the growing mechanical whine. If that door fails, they will expect us to run. Another pulse shook dust from the ceiling vents. Elias turned toward her. What do you want them to find instead? The breaching tool sang through the door like a saw biting into a ship's hull, low and hungry, shaking gray dust loose from the vent grills. Amber emergency lights pulsed across the reception room, washing the marble floor in bands of rust-colored shadow. Princess Celira did not answer at once. Her silver-blue fingers rested on the court console, then moved with sudden precision across its glass surface. They will find their princess, she said, exactly where she is meant to receive them. Elias watched the room change. The broad reception table sank into the floor on silent magnetic rails. Decorative chairs folded flat against the walls. From hidden seams in the ceiling, a crescent-shaped dais descended behind Celira's position, its polished black surface edged in thin white light. It was not cover. It was a throne platform, a place designed to make a ruler visible. That puts you in the open, Elias said. It puts them on record, Celira replied. The old steel bar groaned in its brackets. Another vibration rolled through it, deep enough to buzz against Elias's teeth. He checked the service panel, then the narrow gap beneath the door. Fine metallic powder drifted inward, smelling hot and bitter. The tool was cutting through the outer lock assembly. You have maybe a minute, he said. Celira lifted her chin toward the central floor, then stopped guarding the room like a bunker. Elias looked at the empty space. What do you need? A threshold. The words landed cleanly beneath the mechanical whine. She pressed her palm flat to the console. Royal biometric light climbed her wrist in pale blue lines, reading skin, pulse, blood chemistry. The reception room answered. A thin circle of white radiance rose from the marble around the dais, no higher than an inch, but bright enough to turn the floor into a sealed boundary. Small projector nodes emerged from the walls, their lenses opening with soft clicks. By sovereign emergency authority, Celira said, this chamber is now an audience court under personal witness. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. The recording system caught every syllable and sent it into the sealed wings archive. Elias understood the move a second later. The attackers had accepted the evidence. They had accepted the cameras. But a court was different. A court made every person who crossed that line a petitioner before the crown. Not legally protected. Not forgiven. Identifiable. They can still shoot, Elias said. Yes. Celira's eyes remained on the door. But they cannot claim they found me hiding. He moved before she could say more. Not toward the door. Not toward the bar. He crossed to the recessed wall cabinet and tore open its emergency panel. Inside were ceremonial ward plates, used for crowd control during state audiences. Palm-sized emitters, old-fashioned, blunt, built to make a room obey distances. He grabbed four and slid them across the marble. Stand on the dais, he told her. Inside the circle. Celira's gaze flicked to him. Captain, you wanted a threshold. I'm giving it teeth. He fixed the first plate into the floor seam at the edge of the white ring, then another, then two more. Their magnetic clamps snapped into place. The room filled with the dry scent of ionized air as he armed them. They would not stop 20 assassins. Nothing in that room could do that. But the plates would create a narrow, stuttering field at the boundary, enough to slow a rush, spoil aim, force bodies to bunch where the cameras could see them. A cost measured in seconds. The only currency he had left. The spokesman's voice came through the communications channel, calm beneath the grinding cutter. Princess Celira, step away from the console. Captain Ven, release the barrier. You have shown us your room. Elias set the last ward plate and stood. No. he said, drawing his sidearm. You've shown us your formation. Sailira stepped onto the black dais. The white line brightened around her boots. Beyond the door, the cutting stopped. For one breath, the corridor became perfectly silent. Then the spokesman spoke again, closer now, his voice no longer coming through the channel. Open the door, human. The steel bar gave a long, bending groan. The old steel bar bowed another inch. Rust sifted from its brackets and scattered across the marble like red dust. The room smelled of hot wiring now, sharp and metallic, while the amber lamps above them pulsed with the slow rhythm of a failing heart. Elias kept his sidearm raised, but Princess Sailira stepped away from the black dais instead of retreating behind it. Her silver-blue hand moved past the command console and closed around the narrow gold chain at her throat. For a second, the only sound was the tiny click of its clasp. Then she removed the royal seal. It was no larger than a coin, black glass ringed in dull platinum. Elias turned his head. Keep that on. It identifies a princess, Sailira said. Her voice remained low, almost lost beneath the distant hum of the breech tool cooling outside the door. Not a sovereign court. She pressed the seal into his gloved palm. It was warm from her skin. A thin white line woke around its edge. Elias stared at it. Sailira. The court requires a living custodian. Her fingers folded, his hand closed around the seal. Someone who can act when the crown cannot. He understood before she finished. The sovereign recording system had made the room a court. But without a custodian, it was only a room waiting to become a tomb with better documentation. No, Elias said. You don't hand that to me. I am handing you authority to protect the court. You're handing me your authority. For the next hour. Her eyes held his. Pale light from the dais moved across the fine scales near her temples, turning them almost white. If they enter and separate us, the record continues through you. If they force me to revoke the seal, you will know it was not freely given. If I am unable to speak, don't. The word came out harder than he intended. Sailira did not flinch. She lifted his closed fist toward the biometric reader beside the dais. Captain Venn, will you serve the law inside this room? The door groaned again. Somewhere beyond it, metal scraped over metal. Elias looked at the steel bar. At the narrow, stuttering field plates he had set across the threshold. At 20 heat signatures packed in a corridor that had become too small for them. Then he looked at the princess who had just placed the last piece of her power in his hand. He pressed the seal to the reader. Cold light climbed his wrist, mapped the seams of his glove, and flashed once beneath his jaw. The court answered with a single clear chime. Custodian recognized, said the room. Sailira exhaled through her nose. It was not relief. Not exactly. More like the sound a person made after setting down something too heavy to carry alone. Elias clipped the seal beneath his jacket, beside the spare magazine and the compact med kit. The weight of it was almost nothing. It felt like a door had locked somewhere inside his ribs. The communications channel crackled alive. The spokesman's voice returned, smooth and close enough to imagine his breath on the other side of the reinforced door. Captain Venn. Elias did not answer. We know what the princess has done. We know the seal is on you now. Sailira's gaze sharpened. The man outside continued. Open the door. Walk into the corridor alone. Leave the seal on the floor. You will be permitted to depart this wing alive. The amber lights dimmed, then recovered. Elias tightened his grip on the sidearm. And the princess? A pause. Long enough for the palace ventilation to whisper through the grills. Her fate is not part of your bargain. Sailira stepped beside him, close enough that the sleeve of her formal coat brushed his arm. She did not reach for the seal. She only looked at the door, at the steel bar bending beneath the pressure, and waited to hear whether her human custodian would answer them. The steel bar answered the corridor with a dry, aching creak. Fine gray powder drifted from the doorframe and settled on the black sleeve of Sailira's formal coat. Beyond the reinforced panel, a breaching tool pulsed in slow metallic intervals, each vibration traveling through the marble beneath their boots. Her fate is not part of your bargain, the spokesman repeated. The air smelled faintly of hot insulation. Elias kept his sidearm level, though the muzzle had begun to tremble with the rhythm of the door. Then Sailira moved past him, not toward the seal beneath his jacket, toward the emergency court console, where pale blue symbols floated above the polished stone like cold breath. Her silver-blue fingers touched the biometric plate. A clear chime rang through the reception room. Record this order, she said. Her voice was quiet. It carried anyway. Princess Celira of the Varen Crown releases Captain Elias Venn from all personal protective obligation. Elias turned sharply. Princess, you accepted custody of the court, she said, still facing the console. Not ownership of my life. The court light shifted from blue to white. Somewhere in the wing, hidden locks clicked in acknowledgement. Celira placed her palm flat against the console until its glow traced the narrow bones of her wrist. He is no longer commanded to remain. He is no longer bound to take harm intended for me. His choice from this point forward belongs only to him. The words landed harder than the breaching tool. Elias stared at her profile, at the thin line of light along her cheek, at the dust gathering in her dark hair. She had stripped herself of the last certainty a royal guard could offer, duty. Outside, the drilling stopped. Even the ventilation seemed to hold its breath. The spokesman spoke through the door at last. A graceful gesture, Princess. Captain, the court itself has freed you. Walk away. Celira stepped back from the console. Her hand lowered to her side. No command followed. No look that asked him to stay. That was the point. Elias felt the royal seal against his ribs, cool through his shirt. He unfastened his jacket just enough to draw it into view. The small disc caught the amber emergency light, its crown mark bright against his palm. The assassins could see it only through the narrow security glass beside the door. You offered me a life, he said. You never offered me a reason to live with it. He pressed the seal back beneath his jacket and resealed the clasp. I'm staying. A quiet sound came from Celira then, not a word. Just one measured breath released through her nose. The spokesman's answer was softer. Then you have chosen her grave. No, Elias said. I chose my post. The door shuddered. Not from the breaching tool this time. From 20 sets of boots shifting at once beyond it. Celira's gaze went to the steel bar, then to Elias. The court had made him free. He had made himself hers again. A red warning glyph flared across the console. The outer hinges had been cut. The old bar was now the only thing between the reception room and the corridor. Then the spokesman gave a new order, loud enough for every assassin to hear. Stand clear. Break the door. The hinges tore free with a sound like a ship's hull splitting under pressure. Cold corridor air rushed through the widening seam, carrying the sharp stink of scorched lubricant and the mineral dust of cut metal. The steel bar held for half a second longer. Then the door came inward, dragging a shower of silver screws across the marble. Elias Venn was already moving. He caught the edge with both hands and drove his shoulder into the warped panel before it could fall flat. The impact punched the breath from his lungs. Beyond the gap stood dark figures packed shoulder to shoulder, 20 silhouettes behind matte breaching masks. Their tools glowed dull orange in the amber emergency light. Stand aside, the spokesman said. You cannot hold that door. Watch me. Elias planted one boot against the floor seam and shoved. The door rose 2 inches. Metal screamed against metal. A gloved hand slipped through the gap, reaching for the bar. Elias brought the butt of his sidearm down once against the wrist guard. The hand vanished. Another replaced it. Then another. The pressure outside became organized, relentless. Not a mob. A machine made of people. Celira did not retreat toward the rear wall. Her silver-blue fingers crossed the console instead, shaking only when they touched the glass. The sovereign court display reflected in her eyes. 20 heat signatures, 1 human guardian, 1 princess, and a red line where the door had failed. Elias, she said, move away from it. No, this room has 1 remaining defense. He looked over his shoulder. And the cost? Her gaze held his for 1 beat. The court. He understood. The emergency record was not merely cameras and stored voices. It was the proof she had chosen over safety. The thing that could survive her. The thing that could condemn whoever had sent these people. Outside, a breaching wedge hammered into the opening. The door jumped against Elias's shoulder. Pain burned down his arm. Do it, he said. Celira pressed her palm flat to the console. White biometric light climbed beneath her skin, bright as moonlight under ice. By sovereign authority, she whispered, I invoke null containment. The room changed. Every display blinked once. The amber lights died. The recording glyph above the console went black. For a breath, there was nothing except the rasp of Elias's breathing and the smell of hot steel. Then the palace released its last defense. A low electromagnetic pulse rolled through the reception room, silent at first, then deep enough to tremble in Elias's teeth. Blue arcs crawled across the broken doorframe. The assassin's breaching tools snapped dark. Their visors flashed white. Several figures stumbled back into the corridor, boots scraping over scattered screws. Elias felt his own sidearm go dead at his hip. The court console cracked from corner to corner. Smoke curled from its edge in thin gray ribbons. Celira swayed beside it, one hand still against the ruined glass. The evidence was gone. Every recorded name, every captured voice, every second of proof she had been willing to die to preserve. The spokesman's mask turned toward the dead console. For the first time, his voice lost its smoothness. You burned your own court. Celira lifted her chin. Blue emergency light from the corridor washed over her face. No, she said quietly. I spent it. Elias heard movement beyond the doorway. Not electronic this time. Cloth. Boots. The dry click of tools being set aside. The pulse had blinded their equipment, but it had not removed the 20 people wearing it. He tightened his grip on the bent door. The assassins could no longer force it with machines. They would have to come through by hand. And now there was no record left to tell the galaxy what happened next. The smell of hot insulation hung in the reception room, sharp beneath the sweeter scent of crushed blue lilies from the overturned ceremonial table. Outside, a gloved hand scraped once across the ruined doorframe. Then another. 20 people had stopped pretending they needed machines. Elias Vin let the bent door rest against his shoulder for one more second. Its steel skin was warm from the breech tool. His disabled sidearm lay useless on the marble near his boot. Behind him, Princess Celira stood beside the dead emergency console, silver-blue fingers curled around nothing. Her court was gone. Her authority had burned itself silent. They will come through one at a time, Elias said. The spokesman gave a dry laugh from the corridor. Then you will die one at a time, human. Elias looked down at the royal seal beneath his jacket. Its faint blue edge still glowed through the fabric. Not a weapon, not a shield. A promise made visible. He pulled it free and held it where the corridor lights could reach it. The spokesman's laughter stopped. That seal belongs to the princess, the masked voice said. No, Elias answered. She gave it to the court. The court gave it to me. The first assassin pushed through the gap, shoulder turned sideways, one hand braced on the splintered frame. Elias did not strike him. He stepped back instead. The assassin paused, confused by the space Elias had offered. Celira's breath caught softly behind him. Elias raised the seal. By sovereign custody, he said, his voice carrying into the dead corridor. I name every person beyond that threshold a witness to royal blood. A cold blue pulse moved through the seal. It was weak, barely enough to tint the assassin's black mask. But it did not need the court. It did not need a recording system. The transfer had already been recognized. The palace itself had recognized it. The man in the doorway looked back toward the spokesman. He cannot do that, someone whispered. He is human. He is the custodian, Celira said. Her voice was quiet, but it crossed the room like a blade laid flat on stone. The first assassin remained half inside, half outside. Elias could see his eyes through the narrow slit in the mask. Not fear. Calculation. The order had been to erase a princess. A royal custodian was something else. Killing one meant declaring that royal authority could be taken by force from anyone who carried it. It would turn a hidden murder into a challenge against the throne itself. The spokesman stepped closer. His boots clicked over broken equipment. Give me the seal, he said. Elias closed his hand around it. You brought 20 people for one woman. Move. You brought them because you thought she would stand alone. The spokesman's mask tilted toward Celira. Princess, order him aside. For a moment, only the damaged ventilation fans answered, coughing warm air through the grills. Celira looked at Elias. No command sat behind her eyes now. No royal pressure. Only the freedom she had given him returned to her hands. Then she walked past the shattered console and placed herself beside him. Her shoulder did not touch his. It came close enough that he felt the cool radiance of her skin against the heat in the room. Captain Vin is no longer under my command, she said. Neither is my seal. The spokesman's posture tightened. Then he is an obstacle. Elias shifted the ruined door with his boot, turning its broken edge across the opening. Not to hold it forever, just to make the next step deliberate. No, he said. On the line you have to cross in your own names. The 20 assassins stood in the blue corridor with their masks lit by the seal's thin glow. Their tools were dead. Their hidden court was dead. And for the first time, the spokesman had to decide whether he had come to kill a princess or to begin a war with the human standing beside her. The broken door ticked in its frame as cooling metal tightened around the twisted hinge pins. Blue emergency lights spilled across the corridor in thin, hard bands, catching on 20 masked faces and the pale dust floating between them. Elias Vin looked at the men beyond the threshold, then down at the royal seal resting in his palm. Its glow was weak now. Not dead, just small, like a star seen through smoke. You wanted a silent death, he said. His voice stayed low. That ended when you brought 20 witnesses. The spokesman's mask turned a fraction toward the others. No one moved. Their dead breaching tools hung from gloved hands. Their formation had lost its shape. They were no longer a hidden blade. They were 20 people standing under palace light. Princess Sailira lifted her chin. The silver-blue skin at her throat caught the cold radiance from the ruined console. The sovereign court is gone, she said. But my authority is not. Her fingers opened over the wall panel beside the shattered doorway. The panel had gone black after the null pulse. For a moment, nothing answered. Then a small mechanical relay clicked somewhere inside the wall. Old, separate from the court, built for fire, vacuum, and the kind of emergencies no ruler wanted recorded in a private archive. Sailira pressed her bare hand against the manual crown plate. A low bell rolled through the sealed wing. It was not an alarm. It was older than that. A palace summons. The sound traveled through steel, marble, and locked service shafts. One note, then another. Every public corridor beyond the reception wing lit gold. The spokesman stepped forward before he seemed to realize he had chosen to. Stop that. Elias shifted the ruined door aside. The metal scraped over stone with a harsh, dragging cry. He did not raise his weapon. It was useless now. He did not brace the opening with his body. Instead, he cleared it completely. Cold corridor air entered the room, carrying the clean mineral scent of rain from the palace gardens below. No, Elias said. You step back. The spokesman's hand rose, empty, toward the line of assassins. Captain, you don't understand what follows if we leave here identified. I understand exactly. Elias held the seal where all 20 could see it. You crossed a royal threshold under masks. You came to erase a woman because she would not let you erase the law. Now you can walk away as assassins. He glanced toward Sailira. Or stay long enough to become soldiers who chose not to kill their princess. Sailira said nothing. She did not order them. She did not promise them mercy. The silence she gave them was heavier than either. From far beyond the wing, boots began to answer the palace summons. Not rushing yet. Gathering. Doors opened in distant halls. Voices rose, uncertain and human, alien, ordinary. The spokesman looked at the open doorway. At the princess he had been sent to bury in silence. At the human captain who had locked one door when it mattered, and had opened it only when hiding had become the greater danger. Slowly, the spokesman removed his mask. He was older than Elias expected. Gray ridges marked the corners of his eyes. His face was wet with sweat beneath the blue light. My name is Tarek Sol, he said. The name landed in the corridor without protection. One assassin after another followed. Masks struck the floor with soft, hollow taps. 20 tools lay beside them. 20 faces stood exposed. Sailira watched them with her hands at her sides. Her shoulders were still. Her voice, when it came, was quiet enough that Elias heard the bell fading behind it. You will be held. You will be heard. And no one will be made to disappear for speaking. Tarek Sol lowered himself to one knee. The others did the same, not in worship, not in surrender to fear, but because there was no longer anywhere left to hide. Elias stood between the open room and the princess for one final breath. Then Sailira touched his sleeve, light as falling ash. He turned. Her eyes held the gold of the waking palace and the blue reflection of the ruined court. You were free to leave, she said. I know, Elias answered. Beyond them, the 20 assassins waited for justice in the open light. And in a palace built to protect power, one human had proved that the strongest lock was the one placed between mercy and harm.